Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to have Pierre du Plessis on with us today. And if you are not familiar, Pierre is one of the coaches on our Exponent Marketplace, which is a platform designed to help you connect with qualified providers who can help you answer questions relating to your faith, or your professional life. And Pierre is one of the professional coaches on the platform with us. Pierre started his career in fashion and design, then moved to marketing, startups, theology, human development, and edutech. He has more than 2 decades of experience developing people and building businesses and products that matter. He's a sought-after speaker on human dynamics, strategy, and navigating uncertainty. He has spoken on 4 TEDx stages and has engaged with leading organizations around the globe, including Hatch, BP, Yum, and many others. He is the founder of Be Brave. He's written 4 books and received the Desmond Tutu Gerrit Brand Prize for Literature in 2018. During the pandemic, he launched an online community of practice to foster the power of collective learning and shared accountability in a community of like-minded people. And Pierre's insights empower businesses to understand, map, and harness complex human behaviors for impactful strategies and game-changing products. He currently lives in Cape Town with his wife and 2 kids. Thanks so much for joining us today, Pierre.
Thank you so much for reading that very long bio.
Yes, there's a lot to introduce here. So I'd love for you to just start by telling us a little bit of your story and what led you to where you are today.
Sure. So, as you said in the intro, I started my life out in fashion design and then moved from there into advertising, marketing, and eventually design thinking, product development, and the behavior science as well. And then started working with a couple of startups and also working with teams along the way, and eventually ending up where Be Brave business now works solely with designing strategies for businesses and then also helping their teams, coaching their teams to be better teams. So that's the one half of my life. And the other half of my life is in theology,
Hmm.
where I planted a church in 2006, a really creative, kind of interesting kind of space in which we ran for about 10, 11 years. And then after that was also more introduced in it, working for a church and a community here in Cape Town. And I'm still studying theology. I feel like I'm sort of a perpetual student. So my life and my church life, my business life sort of have these two little parallel paths, which I find really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so were you born and raised in Cape Town?
No, I was born
Okay.
in the Eastern Cape,
Okay.
so the kind of rural part of South Africa, and then most of my life I lived in the capital in Pretoria.
Okay.
So we up north, and we moved down to Cape Town about 8 years ago with our family, and we haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. Fantastic. So I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about positioning strategy, kind of what you said we wanted to focus on today and why that is so essential to your work, especially in design thinking.
Sure. So most of the strategy work we do is helping businesses to position themselves in such a way that they can win. So when you're in business, there's really only 3 ways for you to win or to build a successful business. You either have to be first, which is almost always impossible, or you have to be the best, which is possible but extremely difficult, or you have to be different. So being different is usually your best bet at
Mm-hmm.
success. So what we do when we design a strategy for people is we sit with them and help them figure out how they are different and how they will win and to leverage that difference, that sort of unique positioning in the marketplace. So yeah, simply like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So what are some tools when you're working with a client that you might use to help them kind of identify what makes them different and what sets them apart?
Sure. So, because of my experience in theology and in church, and I'm also kind of well practiced in spiritual direction,
Hmm.
which is really a reflective practice about how to figure out what is God's will for your life as a human being. And so, what I've done is to take that process of reflecting back onto your story and reflecting on your day-to-day experience and applied that to business. So, in a strategy session, for example, we'll talk a lot about things like where do you come from as an individual? Like, where does the team come from? Everybody around the table, what is their sort of combined stories? What are similarities in the stories? And we talk about the business also as though it's a human being. So we'll reflect back on the business's story and then highlight these sort of peaks of where there was something that was really life-giving, or other times where things that were really sort of life, sort of soul-destroying. So, and then reflect together on that, and in that way sort of determine when were you winning, when you were engaging with what. And from a spiritual direction point of view, we would say that that sort of life-giving consolation is
Mm.
what God's will is for you, for your life, where you can be drawn into what he wants for you, into his hope and into his love. So, and we do the same thing with business. So it's a really, and I think that makes what we do very different than to normal strategy by spreadsheet or using normal frameworks. We do really do like a reflective process. And when we work with clients that are more spiritual or more religious, it actually makes it so much easier, because then you can just use the language going, okay, well, what do you feel God wants for you? Like, it's not, then I don't have to hide the language as much. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, that's all. So how do you kind of translate that from like talking to an individual, helping them kind of answer that and discovering those answers in their story to their business or the organization and the culture that they're trying to build?
So for me, when we work with a business, so normally work with the founder or the owners and the core team. And it's really that core team, their individual stories, that drive the values of the business. So whether or not people don't always like to admit that, but it's very true. So if those people, for example, have a very high value for empathy and compassion, right, then it's very clear that that's going to be part of the business's culture, to have this very empathetic or compassionate culture towards customers, for example. And then that forms part of their strategy, saying like, well, if you have all these compassionate and empathetic people in your team, and that's naturally then the culture of the business, then it makes sense that that becomes your strategy. And you can sort of reverse engineer that in any way. Like if you have a group of extremely competitive people, then it makes sense that the culture would then become that, a very competitive culture. And then that also becomes your strategic edge. So those things, like they sort of fit together or weave together in such a way. So it's like really like I said earlier, it's like a really deep reflecting and sort of intuitive process to come and then figure out the positioning strategy, like how are you different? And then we look at other things as well in a business, like what are your strengths? Just the same as you would for a human being. Like you can be passionate about something, but you might not be very good at it. So we ask both those questions. You go, what are you passionate about? What do you care about? What is the business really naturally good at? And let's put those two things together and see if we can find some sort of commonality in going, well, if you're really compassionate and you care about that, and you're also really good at designing communities, then those are things that need to go together. Like those things match. And then once you align strengths with value and passion, then those things, they sort of feed off of one another, and they create something that's truly special and truly unique.
Mm. As I was preparing for to talk with you today, I was watching some of your content and some of your talks, and you said something, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and how you kind of came to define intelligence in that way?
Oh yeah, so that's actually, well, I wish it was me. That was actually a Stephen Hawking quote.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Is
Thanks.
the ability to adapt to change. Yeah, I love that. I love that talk, because I'm also a keynote speaker. So I often get asked to speak with businesses, like as you said in the beginning. And that quote is really defines to me what like a human being is. Because if when the world changes or our environment changes, or there's a disaster or chaos or whatever happens, humans are different than animals in that way, or the rest of the animals, in a way that we adapt to change. We don't just lay down and die. Like when there's a drought, we make a plan to build a dam and to save water, or whatever. If there's a war or whatever the crisis is, humans adapt and change in order to keep on surviving and thriving. So, and that makes humanity very unique. And it's something that we tend to forget, because I think often people, when chaos hits and change hits, they freeze, or they fight, or they flee, and they react in these kind of very sort of predictable ways, instead of stopping and thinking and using all of this intelligence that we have to make a plan, to create something new, and like plot a new strategy to go, okay, this is what's happening. This is the strengths that I've got. This is what I'm passionate about. Okay, how am I going to solve this problem? And that's what intelligence is. And that's something that's like that I'm really passionate about, is to help people understand that they can do that, so that they can actually change something. So humans have this way, we can imagine a different future.
Mm,
We can say that this is where we think the world is heading, but we actually want it to be this way. We want it to be kingdom of God way, right?
mhm.
So, and then we can collaborate, work together in a team to get there, to make a plan. And I mean, my dogs don't do that. They don't sit around imagining a different future and collaborate deeply at night to kind of figure it out. Like, they're just happy to get a treat. So,
Yes.
and yeah, often we forget that.
Yeah, yeah. Is that how do you, when you're working with a business leader or team, like how do you help them really unlock that and say, hey, this is something that you can do and you don't have to stay stuck here?
I think one of the main things is to get them to accept that this is happening. I think
Hmm.
what's really difficult for people most of the time is to accept that change is happening, or accept that things are chaotic,
Yeah.
because they keep on, and often the weird thing about humans, or this sort of paradoxical thing, is that we, as much as we can cope with change and we can create amazing things, we don't really like it. Like, we don't like change. Like, if your kind of very primitive brain would have its way, it'll have you on the couch like watching Netflix and eating carbs like all the time, because that's a safe place for you to be, right? So it wants to keep you safe, keep you away from change and chaos. So to get people to accept that there's no going back, like, the world has changed,
Hmm.
it will keep on changing, and there's no going back to the good old days or the way it was or whatever. Like, there's only going forward, and helping them to calm down, take a couple of deep breaths. And sometimes it is just that, somebody just telling them the kind of the hard facts and going, you need to accept this, that it's not going to go back to the way it was, and take a couple of deep breaths, and now we're going to make a plan. So we're going to sit together and use our brains and make a plan.
So something else that you said, this was written, so you can tell me if this is a quote or if this is yours, but it was by shedding light into dark corners of the human psyche, you help offer insights that can present businesses with strategies to navigate a chaotic and complex world. That's yours,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about that and kind of, I don't feel like I hear a lot of coaches, especially in this business strategy place, talk about engaging with some of the darker parts of ourselves. So yeah, tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that and what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a and that as well comes from theology, right? It comes from spirituality and spiritual direction. It's this idea that there are parts of us that shape our lives. So the psychologist Jung also said, not it's not an exact quote, but his work comes down to this idea that if you don't make the unconscious, or you can talk about the dark or the shadow, if you don't bring that to light, like, if you don't work on that or focus on that or reveal that, it will keep on directing your life, and you will call it fate. You will think that this is just the way the world is supposed to be, but in fact it's actually past stories, or past narratives, past traumas, past sort of deals that you made with yourself that you're not even aware of anymore, that's actually directing your decisions. So the work that you need to do is to, as an individual, is to sit down and then think about those things. Like, why am I making these decisions? Like, when you reflect, and part of the reflecting process is to think about, I'm always choosing these like soul destroying things. Like, why am I doing that? And then to sit either with somebody else, a coach or a therapist, or whatever you need, or just sitting down yourself and journaling and figuring out, well, why am I doing this? Like, why do I keep on choosing this way? And we keep on repeating the same mistakes. And it's this weird thing. Like, we only start to figure that out, I think, a little bit later in life, when you've made the same mistake enough and you realize, like, the data's in, and maybe I'm the problem. It's not like everybody else like trying to, get at me or something.
Yeah. So what does that process kind of look like? Or maybe what is some of the change or transformation that you've seen in someone who's really been able to take the time and start to kind of unlock and understand, hey, this is why I'm doing this.
I think the success stories, or stories where people have actually changed, is when they are intentional about it.
Hmm.
So they take time to go on retreats, to work with another person, take time to journal or work on themselves, and really start to become open to the harder comments and questions for themselves. And then people get to a point, and I know this from my own life as well, it's like you get to a point where you cannot keep on going down that same road any longer. Like there's this great line from The Matrix that I love so much, like where they stop underneath this bridge and it's raining, and like Neo, the main character, wants to get out of the car and he wants to leave because this is getting too hectic and too weird, like this journey that he's on, and all the craziness. And then the other character, Trinity, as he gets out the car, she goes, "You know where that road leads. You've been down it before." And like that line is so good. Like, but you can only know that once you've reflected on your life often. So, and once you've engaged with that practice, you can go, well, I keep on doing this thing and I keep on making this decision, and it keeps on leading me to the same place, and I'm tired of going to that place. And once people realize that, then they can go through a process of letting that go, like that, uh, letting that sort of that road, or what they thought that road would bring them, to let that go. So, and I think like there's deals or promises that we make ourselves that we say, like, if I keep on doing this, then eventually I'll get X, I'll get what I want. Now, the process of change often is like that you have to realize, okay, well, first of all, this isn't working out. Like, I'm not getting what I want. And then sometimes people would go, well, maybe I just need to try harder. Like, I just need to do the same thing more, or just do it better or whatever. And then, but the real key to unlocking that change is to give up the thing that you want. To say that that thing that I think lies at the end of the road, I need to sacrifice that in a way, and to let that dream or whatever that was die. And often those desires it could be selfish desires, desires for adoration and for money or for power. But it's not even, and it sounds often so terrible when people say that, like, oh, all they want, people want money, or people want control, or people want, adoration. But when you think about it, it's like, people just want to be loved, like just
Mhm.
liked. And
Yeah.
that's also, it's just like, I just want to be liked. And if I keep on doing this thing, I'll be liked. Like, in such a gentle, actually soft way to think about it. And you think about, oh, people are so greedy, they just want more money. It's like, no, no, no. It's
Mm,
not that. They just want to take care of their kids. Right? It's
mm,
not about this desire for like billions of dollars or whatever. Or people just want power. It's like, no, actually, they just want control over their own life. Like, they just want to be able to have some predictability, like they're in this chaos all the time. So you really need to come at those three desires with a lot of empathy and understanding, because those are the exact three desires that you need to lay down, that you need
mm,
to sacrifice, and going, well, because those are, when you think about it, like those are the same three temptations that Jesus faced. So, which is like adoration and power and resources, really, right? So, and then he had to lay them down and say, I'm not going that way. Like, I'm not doing that. And we need to do the same. And that's sort of, and we need to sacrifice both the path. It's not like people think, like, I'm going to stop making this decision. Now I'm going to start making a new decision, a new path, but I'm still going to get the money that I need. It's like, no, no, no,
mm.
that's not how it works. You
Yeah.
need to give up the thing that you actually want in that process, and
Mm,
then figure out what is God's hope for you, right? What does He want for you,
mm,
as a human being? So, and then come to that realization and go like, well, I need to give up the love and the money and the security and my desire for control. So, and those are tough things to do.
yes. Yeah. So how, when you're working with somebody who is like, I just want to get my positioning strategy down, but you say these things, like, what do you say to them to help them understand, like, that's great, but these are kind of the foundational things you need to do in order to get there.
It depends. Like it really depends on the client. Like, if I'm working
Yeah.
with a client that is not in that space, and that's not their question or their desire, that's not where I'll take them.
Yeah.
Like, take them in a different direction, focusing more on strengths and values and compassion and those type of things. And then if the opportunity would present itself, it again depends. If it's a faith-based organization, those conversations are easier. But if it's not, then you have to navigate it kind of very carefully
Mm,
and see what do they need in this moment. Because the longer I can journey with somebody, the more we can start talking about these things, about what do you actually want to build, right? So, why do you actually want to grow? And then if you understand, if you get them to realize, okay, their motivation for growth really like money or control or adoration, like one of those things, you can say, okay, but what's actually really happening underneath that? Like, why do you need that? Why do you feel the organization needs that? Or you can then maybe like push them like just like a little bit of a level deeper and going, well, what is the change that you want to create in the world? Which is a really great question. Like, what is the
Mhm.
change you want to create in the world? And that doesn't mean people often think that means like some charity work or missions work or something like that, but it's not necessarily that. It's like the change is I would just see like Elon Musk's biography is lying here on my shelf. And it's like, I want to get people to Mars, right? I want to do that. So, like, that's the change I want to make. It's not about money or adoration or control. It's about a specific change that I want to make. I want people to have the best gluten-free bread in the world. Like, that's the change I want to create. And I'm a
Yeah.
really good baker. So then that becomes a different story because that's the language of calling, like calling and vocation, not about fulfilling a desire that's actually coming from like a dark and insecure place.
Mm, good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for your time today. And before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you like some fun rapid fire questions. So these are more like
Oh,
get to know you. Just tell me the first answer that comes to your mind. So the first one is, what is your go-to comfort meal?
steak.
Steak. All right. And a book that has changed your life.
Oh, book that has changed my life. Blue Like Jazz, Donald Miller.
That's a good one. And a piece of advice that someone gave you that has stuck with you.
Who is greater than what?
Hmm. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Pierre. If you are interested in meeting with Pierre yourself, I'm going to link his profile down below and you can schedule a meeting with him. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much.